Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Well, good morning, Swami. Thanks for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well, and how about you?
I'm doing great on this Wednesday, October 1st. Can't believe it's the first day of October. Well, thank the listeners for tuning in today. On the Voice of Yoga, we will be talking about the season of autumn and how it is time to harvest our crops. We will discuss about personal accountability and responsibility as the underpinnings of Kriya Yoga. But our main focus of the show is the effects of the choices that we make and how they're going to shape our reality. Swami will also explain how to employ the strategies of Kriya Yoga to guide us in making better choices to experience better returns. So, Swami, why don't you start us off by explaining the saying of how an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure?
Yeah, think before you act. You know, not to be reactive and emotional in our responses. And a big part of the practice of Kriya Yoga that we teach is developing a relationship between the conscious mind and your psychological organs and your feeling state. Because for the most part, a lot of us are being controlled by our feelings. And that's what we talked about in Spiritual Advance, the whole thing of the development of the feeling function, and how the psychological organs are designed to help throttle, regulate, and manage the influences that will percolate from your feeling state, and how to use intelligence to really steer your life in a direction that has a sense of purpose to it.
I was thinking about, as you were explaining that, I've heard the expression that the flap of a butterfly's wings in one country, say Japan, can affect energies and so forth, say in North America. So I know that's on the physical level. How can we interpret that to be in the mental plane?
Well, in this model, everything begins on the mental plane. See, form follows function. How we think is what we become. So it all begins with a thought, and then it manifests into an action. And then the relativity of everything, cause and effect. For every action, there is an equal and an opposite reaction that trickles out from it. And that's one of the things that we always talk about is this whole thing of karma. That what we're putting out is what we're getting back. But it all begins on the mental plane. That being able to control your thoughts will help you manage your actions.
When you talk about the personal accountability, are you talking about how and what we think, and maybe when and how we think? Is that what you're talking about, personal accountability?
Well, yeah, it would start with that, and also one of the things I think we have kind of like the way we're socialized, that we kind of think that life is some sort of arrangement or contract that we have with this cosmic puppeteer, like this authoritarian figure that we envision, this thing that we call God. And we think life is college, that we're kind of getting credit for our actions, our behavior. But in reality and in the yoga model, that it's basically it's all physics. And once you start to understand that you can't have a feeling without a thought, but feelings is what's going to drive your actions, then a big part of being able to manage and be accountable for what you're doing is to control your thoughts, to manage your feelings and be able to conduct your behavior in accordance with the rules that we talked about. And again, it's not so much about the conduct as much as it is what it is that is driving me. What is it that's motivating me? Why am I doing it? The intention behind it. And that's what's, again, it's very different how we teach yoga than the way most people experience it, because we recognize that yoga is this union of the individual with the divine. It is that you literally rebirth your body in a different source of sustenance, that we desire something that is invisible and intangible, and it also allows us to become something different. And it's this internal connection that really gives, the concept of virtue power, so that you're not trying to do something, but you literally have become virtuous. And that becomes, what you would do naturally.
I was reading in the description that we have for the show today, and we talked about, or we said we were going to talk about the effects of the choices that we make and how they affect our reality. But I have another question that, in regards to that, and it has to do with thought and how we think. I'm reading this book by Elizabeth Hyatt called Initiation, and I'm at the part where she has to do her whole exercise is about thinking and in concentration. So I know you always say that, thought is the precursor for everything. Like before we have a pain in our thigh, there was a thought that precedes it. So obviously there has to be thoughts before we make the choices that we make that affect our reality. But can we do it the other way around? Can we visualize a reality that we want and then think and then have the proper thought patterns to create that reality?
Yeah, to answer your question, that's exactly what we're trying to do. And that's a big part of how we're able to make this transition from being the victim to the creator, and why you would want to enlist all of the strategies, so that you could actually get on the other side of this equation, so that you're not the victim where everything is happening to you, but that you are on the other side of it. And it is, that's why the way that we teach yoga is very different, because it does begin with skillful use of thought. And then in our model, there is such a thing as thinking right. And then, of course, the question always comes up, well, that's thinking right for you, or, well, what is thinking right? And, well, thinking right is, in this model, is just knowing the difference between a need and a want, and then knowing what your needs are in their order of importance. Because as we keep coming back to this concept of putting God first, using what you really do need to validate yourself, becomes a platform, that we can actually develop personal accountability, personal responsibility from. Because with the benefit that comes with this internal connection comes calmness and stillness that most of us really don't understand. And that's why we have to purify the body. And that's why we have to train the mind to look for, this invisible, intangible source of sustenance. And the beauty of the practice of yoga is that, we recognize that our bodies have needs, that we're all codependent. And the secret is to use what you really do need to validate yourself, but by the same token, the body needs something that it can sink its teeth into for validation. And that's where the breath became the go-between. Air is your number 2 life-sustaining force, but it's invisible but tangible, because we can hold our breath and put ourselves in a real life-threatening situation. Now, once you have elevated breath to a position of importance that it warrants in your value system, now you've changed how you're thinking. Now you're affecting your number 1 life-sustaining force. But at least you're pointed in the right direction. You're not looking for something external that's tangible and visible, but you're looking for something that's invisible and intangible. And you've got an anchor. Breath becomes that anchor. And then by internalizing the breath as an image that you're going to use to validate yourself, now comes this sense of calmness. Now you have the power of, concentration. Now you can focus on something that is not going to create disturbances. And the benefit that comes with that is the calmness, the confidence. Because when your sense of well-being is totally established in what you really do need, you believe you're good enough. See, like we have been saying, thought is an energy. And it's capable of producing effects, but it's all measurable based on the amount of strength we emit it with. It's belief that gives thought the power of intention. Now, when you believe you're good enough, and then you ask for what you want in the language that the universe understands, you can emit that thought with the power of intention. If you don't believe you're good enough, you can emit the same thought, but it dribbles off with the burden of doubt, and it doesn't really materialize. So the things that have to be in place in order for you to really successfully be able to shape your reality is, you have to believe you're good enough and then ask for what you want. And that's a big part of, the way that we teach yoga. Because if you don't feel good enough, that's one of the reasons why, there is so much what I call celebrity pseudo-spiritualism today. And most of it is all based on the placebo effect. People are just looking for something to believe in. People are just looking for permission to do something. And once you have that, then of course you can affect the change. But when you can consciously and willfully, start to see how everything is working, then of course you're in a completely different vantage point in shaping your reality.
I think I have a good example of that. So this morning I had to go to an office, and I had to sign in, and then I thought I was going to be taken right away. So that was my thought, that, I got there early and I was going to get right in, whatever, and then I had to sit in the waiting room for 10 minutes. So then I said to myself, well, I can either think that this is an inconvenience to me and cause me to be impatient, or I can change how I think about that, turn to, like you say, take a right turn, turn to spirit and say, you know what, maybe this is just a lesson for me to learn patience. Or so how I thought about that whole inconvenience, could be how I can change my reality. So instead of getting all upset about it, I just looked at it and said, you know what, I could either get really upset about this or learn from that experience and just say, you know what, I'll just take a deep breath and then learn this as a lesson in patience. Is that kind of like what we're talking about? So you can even create how you think about a certain event or a situation?
Well, I think what we learn is how to shape our inner state to fit the demands of the world. That it's not like I need this appointment. That when you have the benefit of internal support, you're not drawing off of the external reinforcement. You have the benefit of internal support. I'm not in danger. And then, of course, now you evaluate the situation. It's like I thought I was going to be able to, get in sooner. I don't have this kind of time, and therefore, I could tailor a different response. And it's like, I'm not going to be able to wait. So you're not emotionally reacting to the external circumstance, but you're proactively shaping your inner state to fit what's happening in the outside world. And then now you're making a conscious choice. And then again, you're processing the whole thing using your mental functions. Perception is how you take in data through your senses. Reason is how you organize and systemize that information. Memory is experience. What happened the last time? And then intuition is our ability to fabricate probable realities. That if I do this, there's a possibility that this, and this will happen. Because if I have to be somewhere else, and I'm thinking, well, if I stay here, I'm going to miss my next appointment. Which is more important? Then I make a conscious choice. And that's what we call being intelligent in decision-making.
Great, thank you for that. I think we'll take this time to pause to hear a word from our sponsor. So listeners, we'll be back with you in a few moments.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate.
If you are looking for a Samadhi-based experience, IPD Kriya Yoga has the goods. A complete yoga program that includes the practices and the process. Kriya Yoga Series 1 live classes and videos. Get your arms around the spiritual science of Kriya Yoga.
The intention of why we practice is to embody spirit, to feel connected to the life force.
Kriya Yoga Asana live classes and videos. A cosmically engineered system of exercises to initiate apotheosis. A system of exercises engineered for dining and dancing at the Cosmic Ballroom. Kriya Yoga Series 2 live classes and videos. A practice in open forum designed to facilitate positive growth of consciousness. Get your Labyrinth video.
I find the positive side of it is it pulls a lot of things together.
Kriya Yoga Mantra and Meditation. With repetition comes absorption. Pray on prana and become divine.
At the same time, we all have a unique talent and gift to give back to the universe.
Private sessions. The mysteries of the universe have always been handed down verbally from teacher to student. Call or click now and get started. 603-929-0303 or www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste.
Purnamariya Purnameva Vashishate.
Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you are listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, let's get back to about this autumn time and harvesting. So my question to you is, how do we know if we're being spiritual and harvesting the right crop?
Yeah, that's probably the most difficult question to answer. And I usually always say that when again, coming back to the scriptures, what does it look like when you love the Lord thy God with your heart, your soul, and your mind? What does it look like, from the Buddhist perspective, when you desire nothing? And my answer to that has always been when, breath becomes your party, breath becomes your beloved, breath becomes your new drug of choice. Because if you do not feel connected to this life force, then chances are you're drawing from a different source of sustenance. I always like Jackson Browne has a song. It's called "Before the Deluge," and one of the lines in that song, he says, with their hands they reach for the golden ring, and their hearts they turn to each other's heart for refuge in the troubled years that came before the deluge. Which, in my opinion, I think that's exactly what most of us do, is with our hands, which is a Mercury image, with our minds, we turn to this concept of the divine. But with our hearts, with our body's feeling state, we turn to each other's heart for refuge. So in essence, we do not have the purity that Jesus asks. That we don't love the Lord thy God with our heart, our soul, and our mind. That we just think that we want the divine, but in fact our bodies are longing for something tangible. And the Bible addressed, this issue with the concept of false gods, and the Yoga Sutras address it with the term avidya, ignorance, mistaking the impermanent for the permanent. And, just using the Yoga Sutras, how do you know when you are harvesting, the divine, as opposed to particles or waves? The litmus test in the Yoga Sutras is constant practice of detachment and constant control of the thought variations. That the benefit of internal support produces a stillness and a calmness that you can't get if you have a dualistic image internalized in your body. So a big part of your practice is making sure your practice is perfect. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why I always say use breath. You don't really want to have some sort of astral image for your concept of a divinity. It could actually be, part of the demise of your practice.
I have another question about the harvesting of our crops. What is happening to us, like right now at this given day, for example? There had to have been a thought that preceded that days or weeks or even months ago. How do they go back and try to think what put me in this particular situation or position or whatever is happening to them now? How do you think about it? How do they go back and try to determine what they thought got them to where they are right now?
That part I don't really waste a lot of time in. Going back and figuring out, how I got where I am, to me isn't really the important part. I try and, it's kind of like, in trading, they talk about back testing a system. But they also tell you that past performance, is not going to guarantee future results. Because every moment is different. And so no matter where you are in your life, that solution begins with circumstances as they are. You don't have to go back and change, what you did prior, but what you have to do is you have to start now. And you start by, employing strategies. And again, that's where, our system of Kriya Yoga, gives you this game plan, that you can actually cross-reference, am I thinking right? Well, if you're not thinking right, then there's where you can start to make a change. Am I breathing right? Well, what is breathing right? And oftentimes, it's simple adjustments like getting maximum volume of oxygen or breathing in and out your nose could have an enormous effect on how you're thinking, how you're feeling, and how you're performing. Am I hydrated? Have I eliminated all the foods that are producing cravings and disturbances in, my mind-body complex? Especially with our Western socialization, we're socialized to think that, there's nothing wrong with substances like caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, and refined sugars. We think this is acceptable, but without an understanding of the physics of spirituality, you will not have attention for something that's invisible and intangible if you're longing for something that's visible and tangible. And, again, you're not getting credit for your conduct. This isn't an incident that could be excused. It's a condition that has to be corrected. And then, the whole concept of exercise can also be another area where people can start to employ strategies. Like we break fitness down into 4 components: strength, flexibility, balance or alignment, and endurance. And one of the things I've noticed is mainstream fitness is strength and endurance intensive. They recognize some benefits to flexibility, but when it comes to alignment, they're pretty much non-existent. And even in the yoga community, there's just a small portion of the yoga community that really focuses on alignment, as an intricate part of asana, meaning posture.
I just want to take a moment and just let our listeners know that all the conversations that we have on our radio show, we also have a class on Thursday evening. It's called our Series 2 class, where you can bring your everyday questions or things like that you have to Swami on Thursday night, either here in Hampton, New Hampshire, or even through Powwow. So I just wanted to remind our listeners that we have that available to you. Our program today, so I'd like to, again, thank you listeners for tuning in today. You can visit us on our website. You can follow us on all the social media, the Pinterest, Twitter, and Facebook. We keep those questions and comments and questions coming because Swami does enjoy hearing from you. Any final thoughts about our program today or next week?
Well, again, I would like to invite people to join the Spiritual Advance. We're on week 14, and, the shaping of a healthy ego, which is, I think, an important part of a spiritual practice. And with that, I would like to, wish everybody a good day and namaste, and I'll give it back to you.
Well, thank you. So be sure to tune into our program next week, and we will be discussing reincarnation and union with the divine. So thank you, listeners, for tuning in today on The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda. We'll be signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.